everyone. How's your Tuesday going? Welcome to Take 5, Tuesday's edition, as we walk through some of the very pertinent words of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is teaching of his disciples basically a different kind of ethic. They lived in one world, and yet they had an ethic of a different world. And yet, as he teaches them, you realize for all of his followers, he doesn't want us to be so segregated in our spiritual world, in our church world, that we don't have any influence on the world in which we live. And so the passage today, now we're going beyond the Beatitudes. We'll be in Matthew 5:13 through 16, probably for a couple of days. The passage today has to do with the believer's influence in the world in which they find themselves. Let me just read you a couple of lines. We'll talk about it and then we'll go back over it. He says, "You are the salt of the earth," in verse 13. And then in verse 14, he says, "You are the light of the world." He uses two very, very common things, salt and light, to describe the Christian's influence in the world in which we live. Now think about it, salt and light. Light is obvious. Everybody needs light. Sunshine, the light in this room. Light is so necessary. Salt is as well. He's taking two things that are absolutely essential and saying, this is you, and this is your responsibility, in a sense, by who you are and what you do, to have an influence in the world in which you live. Salt and light. Salt can have one of two things. It can be used for taste, and if you read different commentaries, and they'll vary on what they think Jesus' meaning is. Salt can be about taste. And so if you're having French fries and you forget to put the salt on it, it's like, something's missing, and so you put some salt on it. Salt can be about taste, but especially in older days when we didn't have refrigeration and things like that, salt was also used for preservation. Something would get spoiled if you didn't salt it. A good example of both of those together, if you've ever had it before, is prosciutto, which is sort of the Italian cured ham, and yet it's not ham. Ham is the Toyota Corolla, and prosciutto is the Lexus of Japanese cars, okay? So prosciutto is this delicious ham that you can have with bread, or you can have with cantaloupe. It's just fabulous. And it's salty, salty, salty on the outside. Why? Because it adds to the taste, and it also procures it. It keeps it from spoiling. I remember going with my grandfather to this little mountainous town. I was a teenager, and we were going to spend the summer together, he and I, and we bought this whole huge slab of prosciutto. You'd see it in the deli, and it kept all summer long because it was salty. It kept for years also because of that. So salt and light, two absolutely necessary things for believers as they think about the influence in their world. Think about the influence in your world, and you're called to be salt and light. And we'll get into what that means, but let me observe one other thing now, and that is this, that the church, the Christians and the church and the world are distinct places. The world is this way, you are to be this way. They're related, so don't go off on a commune somewhere. They're related, but they're distinct. You are the light of the world. You are different than the world. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. So the Christian, in a sense, is part of the world, but also the Christian community is very distinct and offers something necessary for the world. Think about salt and light. If salt is for procurement, the world is decaying. You know that. Just look around. Read the headlines. The world is decaying. You are the light of the world. The world is full of darkness. You also know that, don't you? The Christian is to be the one that brings a sense of a taste, yes, but also to keep from decaying. That's both our message and our works. Our lives ought to be bringing life to a dying world, but also light. Our lives are to be bringing light into the darkness. So as I leave you today, think about the Christian's influence. Think about your influence as salt and light in the world in which you live, in the relationships that you have. We'll continue this idea tomorrow, but I'll see you. Have a great Tuesday.